Welcome to the thrilling world of Security Squawk, where we explore cybersecurity. Guiding you through online threats, we'll aid you in understanding safety protocols and trends. Meet our gurus, Bryan from Exact IT, Reginald from Arc Solvers, and Randy from Tech Rescue. Together, we'll delve into current events and hot cybersecurity topics, helping you comprehend their impact. Stay informed, stay secure. Security Squawk, the business of cybersecurity. Buckle up, let's dive in.
Welcome back to the Security Squawk podcast. I'm Brian Horning, and today we have two stories that prove cybercrime and chaos comes in all flavors. First up, the insider threat that turned into a massive breach, nearly 700,000 customers impacted after a former bank employee decided to walk off with sensitive data. And then we'll head over to Europe, where a U.S. tech vendor got hit with ransomware, and suddenly airports across the continent were running on pen and paper. So if you like stress testing patience, this was your weekend. So Randy's going to dive into these insider threat cases. I'll break down how a U.S. company ended up at the center of Europe's airport meltdown, why every MSP, IT leader, and person needs to pay attention. Let's get into it. So insider threats are like termites here, and if you don't notice them until something important starts sagging. And in this case, a former FinWise Bank employee had access to customer data, which eventually tied into American First Finance. According to filings with the Maine Attorney General, nearly 698,000 people were impacted. And here's the kicker. They didn't even discover it until over a year later. And that's not a crack in the door. That's the whole door off the hinges. So Randy, break this one down for us. How does something like this happen? What does it say about offboarding, shadow access, and the tangled web of finance vendors?
Yeah, so apparently an employee at FinWise, after they left, details are not clear at this point. After they left, they were able to get back into the system. Like you mentioned, this was May of 2024. They discovered it around middle of July of this year. They sent out notifications to the people whose data was impacted just a couple weeks later. And then they recently had to file with the state of Maine because of some kind of compliance issue there. And so the details aren't really clear yet, exactly how it happened. That's going to come out. Most likely there will be a trial. But what I wanted to talk about, like, what can you do to help prevent this kind of stuff? And, because we're talking almost 700,000, 689,000, I believe is the exact-ish number. And we've got all kinds of personal information, financial information that has been leaked. The quote unquote bad guys could use that to do all kinds of nasty stuff to get money out of people. But what I really wanted to look into, Brian, a little bit here was, what can a company do to help prevent this? Okay. So, and you're looking at some different types of people, right? You're looking at some people that are just straight up bad. And what can you do to prevent that? You're looking at people that might be desperate, that, obviously morally compromised, that might be under pressure, might do something like this. And there are some things that companies can do. So you already mentioned one of them is have really good offboarding. And that means have a written process, have an automated process, or have both, where when somebody leaves, you methodically go through every single place that they have access and you remove that access. So insider systems, server logins, 365 logins, financial tools, logins, all that. It's got to be, the accounts have to be shut down, closed, disabled. Maybe you're having to keep this person's 365 account for a while. Well, you can block the sign in. You can make it a shared box where you're keeping all the stuff. You can block the sign in. So a really strong offboarding process. That's the first thing. And then I would also add a couple other things. One, you need to have a regular audit. Have a regular audit of the people that have left and just go through and make sure in that audit. Now, I know this is easier said than done, and I'm putting it in very simple terms here, but that's my shtick, right? But anyway, have this audit where you make sure that the people that you said you've offboarded have been properly offboarded. Sometimes things are missed. I was going through with a technician yesterday. I was going through a document of some steps that they were supposed to take, got down to like number 6. Technician said, well, I couldn't do this one because, something came up or I couldn't access it or whatever. Those are the kind of things that you maybe potentially can find in an audit. And then the other thing that I would say, Bryan, and this really boils down to accountability, and is to keep logs of everything. That way you find out a year later that they've been back in the system, that you have logs of that, and they can be held accountable. Those logs can be turned over to law enforcement. So if you have that person that's on the fence, maybe that's desperate, wants to do something to get money or whatever, knowing that they're going to get caught can be a deterrent. Knowing that you're keeping those logs and you're able to get in there and look and see exactly what they did, where they went, is huge. And that's those are 3 ideas that I have. I'm wondering if you have any other ideas to add to that to prevent this potential insider threat.
I mean, you hit on a lot. I would say this is still a massive problem for companies. They really struggle to get this right a lot of times because I would say a lot of companies, they struggle because they don't fully understand and embrace the idea that HR needs to work with IT to successfully make sure that this happens. And it has to be done right 100% of the time. And that's another problem, right? Because either companies aren't really paying attention to this and they're not doing a good job at it at all, or they kind of know they need to do it, but they might not do it for 100% of the employees that leave the company for whatever reason, right? I could sit here and give you probably 20 different reasons I can think of off the top of my head for companies that we've seen who didn't notify IT that they let a certain person go or somebody left the company and something adverse happened. For I can think of some companies that they do it right for 90% of the employees, but then they let somebody go maybe in management or something like that, and they just don't do it for that person. Right. And it's things like that, those little cracks that you don't think are going to come back to bite you. I've seen them come back to bite companies really hard. Right. And then the other part of it is we just tell ourselves things that aren't true. We think we have employees that have a higher level of morale, or we don't really understand maybe some of the outside pressures that our employees are dealing with personally, and we're not paying attention to it. So you wouldn't think that they would do something, but they were motivated by something outside of the business to, maybe start their own business and steal your information and help them get a head start. That's the number one thing I think I see with insider threats is people are stealing, intel on companies to go start their own thing. So it's just a matter of awareness for me, Randy, and paying attention to this stuff. And it's not just, a feel good exercise to create a policy and then not follow it. Offboarding isn't just an HR process. It has to involve everybody, and everybody who's in charge of hiring, firing should understand what that process is. But HR, I think ultimately, they have to be the ones that kind of say okay, we have to now contact IT, right? That's the easiest way to implement something like this. It's it goes from the manager or whoever's making the decision to HR. HR contacts IT, right? And it doesn't move kind of from there until IT confirms everything's been shut down and locked out, right? And a lot of times you got to make the decision to do this stuff ahead of time instead of after the fact, right? Somebody quits or you realize that they're leaving you because you realize that they're offloading information somewhere and you're like, oh, looks like this person's getting ready to like quit or something, right? That happens all the time, where somebody who thinks they're being slick gets caught in the process. And you got to let that person go right then and there, right? And other times you're firing people, what I would say in a premeditated fashion, where you're pulling them into a room and letting them go. And you don't have a different process for that. You want to be able to, lock that person out maybe while they're in the room, so when they return to their desk, they can't log in and do something adverse to the system.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Well, I would also say, like, if you're a smaller business that doesn't have like your own IT departments outsourced, you've got to stay in contact with your IT company. You need to let them know when people leave so they can offboard them from their end. That's just a really big deal. Make sure you have that communication.
Right. And like, would you agree or would you disagree with, like, more people, I think, do stuff out of disgruntled employment reasons than like, hey, I'm going to like hack this company because I have access, right? I think that's more what you have to watch out for. Is like somebody's either trying to enrich themselves or help themselves in their next position, as I mentioned, as opposed to somebody who's sitting there going like, hey, I'm going to deploy ransomware on this company and, get a cut. Right. We're not seeing that too much, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's super obvious if they did that, and they're going to get caught for sure. If they deploy ransomware, I mean, maybe not,
I don't agree.
Some companies, they wouldn't, I guess.
I mean, I don't agree. I mean, like you could, I'm not going to say it.
I don't want to give anybody any ideas, right?
Yeah, right. So I'm just going to leave it at that. You can definitely, if you have inside access to a network, it wouldn't be very hard for you to get there if you knew what to do. Let's put it that way. So, all right, here we go.
Yes.
Are we switching over to my topics already? Wow, that was quick. So, God, man, this is pretty wild. So I wasn't going to talk about this, Randy, when I saw it, because I try to keep it to the U.S. because that's mainly our audience. Although we do have Luke across the pond, who is one of our super fans of the show. I think he already commented about this. It's definitely big news, but when you start to look at the details and you see that the company who built the software that's at the center of this ransomware attack is a U.S.-based company. And that U.S.-based company is dealing with a ransomware attack, and it has crippled basically every airport check-in in the EU. So picture this: Friday night in Europe, and the check-in software that so many airports rely on suddenly go belly up. So we got Heathrow, Brussels, Berlin, all those passengers stuck in long lines, airline staff pulling out pens and paper like it's 1982 all over again, Randy. And EU cyber agency confirmed it was a ransomware attack. And here's the key detail: it wasn't the airports themselves. It was Collins Aerospace, a US-based company owned by RTX. Their system, called Muse, M-U-S-E, handles check-in and boarding. And when it went offline, it dragged the airports across Europe with it. So why does this matter to you if you're in IT, if you're an MSP, if you're just in making decisions on IT in general at your company? Because this is the supply chain problem that we talk about on this show all the time in action. It doesn't matter if your defenses are strong. If your critical vendor takes a hit, you're standing in the same line as everyone else. And that's the reality. So here's what we know. Dozens of flights were delayed or canceled. Airports scrambled to go to manual, and the outage stretched into the weekend and there's no word yet on which ransomware group is behind it. But the EU Cyber Agency called it a third-party ransomware incident. So if you haven't built vendor outage scenarios into your playbook, you're already behind. And we've been screaming about this on this channel for at least 2 years at this point. Randy, connect the dots for us here. We've got insider risk on one side, third-party meltdown on the other side. What are some commonalities when it comes to this stuff?
Oh gosh. I hadn't thought about that. Let me just throw some stuff.
What are you thinking about
off the top of my head? Well, so what okay, I'll be honest. First thing that pops in my mind was CrowdStrike. And CrowdStrike rolled out an update. It was a new employee. They rolled out an update. It broke CrowdStrike. It took a lot of airports off, a lot of US airlines offline. And there was that. And then it didn't affect Southwest Airlines because they were running on Windows XP. Then we had a big storm either before or after that Windows XP wasn't enough for Southwest. And Southwest then got a huge fine. And I'm bringing it back around. This is what's going through my head is I wonder how many of these airlines are going to end up getting fined for this delay on this third party software that they're relying on. And then that makes me think, Bryan, and I'm just doing a brain dump here. That makes me think about, you already kind of mentioned it. If you have vendors, which we all do, very few programs run on 100% their own CRUD, right? If you have vendors and they go down, do you have a backup plan? Okay. So Bryan, most IT companies are running off of 365 or Google Workspace. What if one of those goes down? Do you have a plan? Do you have a way to contact your customers? Do you have a way to get business done? If those go down, do you have a backup plan? That's what I'm thinking. And I don't think I'm connecting the dots here yet. So I want to know what you're thinking on that.
Well, no, you're right. I mean, the bottom line is like, if you don't have a plan for this stuff, and like, it's a tough situation because this is a very critical piece of software that you probably invested a ton of money in. It's not like you're going to go invest in a backup to it, right? But we're starting, like, the reality of it is like you just have to accept that, like, if you're going to do these things and you're not going to have a real backup plan, this is the risk you run. When this company goes down, you're going to go down with it, right? And that's essentially what you're deciding to do when you decide to purchase a SaaS application and put all your eggs in that basket, right? If you don't vet their security and their redundancy and their ability to get back up quickly, you're going to suffer the same fate that the folks who had to deal with that payroll company that got hit several years ago, right? You couldn't run payroll for 3 months.
Yep. There's
right?
still repercussions from that.
I mean, like I told you guys the other day, I think last week I hit you up and said, yo, you see Jaguar is still down. Like Land Rover, they're still down. They can't sell cars for 3 weeks now. 4 weeks we're going on.
Yep.
If you don't think your vendor could suffer a similar fate, you're kidding yourself. Now, Randy mentioned like Google, Microsoft. All in all, they do a pretty good job of making sure that their stuff is redundant, because if you don't think that they have problems and things go down and your servers continues to work, they've learned and they've built redundancy over 20 years for sure, probably better than most. But most companies are not Google and Microsoft, right? And it doesn't mean because they built all these things that they're never going to have a widespread problem one day.
Right.
Right. So the chances are lower than, say, like your mid-market SaaS company or, not a Microsoft or not a big company like them or Google or Facebook or anybody. Right. So that is the situation when you pick these mid-market SaaS vendors like Salesforce. Salesforce is definitely a platform that I think might have a little problem one day because they don't have the kind of redundancy like a Microsoft or, other large service providers. So they are vulnerable, right? And then go down the list from there, like Intuit, QuickBooks, Sage, accounting, right? These are all things that companies rely on. Your phone system, right? It's probably voice over IP based. These are all vulnerabilities in your business that you need to look at and say, yeah, we need that to run if you need to make phone calls in your business every day, you need a backup phone system, or you need a backup plan for the phone system. It could be just as easy as saying we're going to switch to our personal cell phones, right? But everybody should know that beforehand, not during the event. Like, what do we do? And everybody's running around like a chicken with their head cut off and making decisions in real time, which is never good.
Mm-hmm.
So, you gotta plan for this stuff. You gotta prepare for it, because you're gonna have to deal with these third party incidents that are going to impact your business. And it's just like, that's where the world's going, right? Like, the world is going in this direction to SaaS and streaming and everything being like purchased on a per usage model, right? We've been conditioned to accept it, and the world is embracing it, and that's the model we're going to. And when you go to that model, this is the risk that goes with it. So unless you have some kind of backup plan, you're going to be just relying on this company to be resilient and get back up on their feet quickly, so it doesn't impact your business.
Yes. And, there's going to be ripples from this, because, you have sometimes planes fly from London to Zurich, right? And there's another pilot in Zurich waiting to fly that plane to go from Zurich to whatever. And, maybe only Heathrow's down and Zurich's not, but Zurich gets affected because their dang plane never showed up because they couldn't put people on it. You know what I mean? And so it causes a ripple effect throughout the system. So, yeah. And I was reading so Heathrow Airport put out a post on X. Was reading some of the comments. If you saw a chuckle on my face, not a funny situation, but some of the comments, one of them made me laugh. They called it a flightmare.
I'll bring it up.
Yeah. Well, some of them are not good. So as usual on social media, there's all the riffraff and filth and, who knows what.
All right, let's burn. I mean, we're going to wrap up the show here in a few minutes anyway. We'll keep you updated on this system. I'm sure it's causing major panic over there, but this could happen here in the U.S. This is a U.S.-based company that happened to outsource their stuff to European airports, and why they're not in U.S. airports is probably just a matter of politics. It could easily happen here to this if whatever company probably runs the system for the airlines over here, it could probably happen just as easily in the United States, right? So, and it just causes major problems and major delays and major disruptions to businesses. So let's dig into some of these comments. I got a question here. How does your team help organization prevent these types of cyber attacks? Are there specific tools or strategies you recommend? Yeah, I mean, I would answer this question pretty simply. It's not a tool, and it's not about tools. Strategy, yes, follow a framework. Go pick a framework and follow it from top to bottom, and make sure you're doing everything inside of that framework. There's plenty of them out there to choose from. I'm a fan of NIST cybersecurity framework. You can use CIS, you can use ISO, you can use anyone you want, quite frankly. I mean, there's even private organizations and companies that have built cybersecurity frameworks, right? But pick one, learn it, follow it, and implement everything you need to do inside of it. And that is how you help organizations prevent cyber attacks. If you follow frameworks, even to I say follow them 100%, that's my recommendation. But even if you get like 60 or 80% of it done, that's enough to make hackers go, this ain't worth it. This is too hard. I'm moving on. Yeah. Right? And they move on to other targets because it's too much of their time to try to get in. So unless you're like storing and hosting like national secrets, they're not going to sit there and like bang on your door and try to get in when you have all these defenses up.
I give the example, Brian. We have an outlet mall, near in our town. It's the third most highly visited destination in Texas. I think it's like the Alamo is like number one. I don't know what number two is, but it's like number three. It gets like 5-6 million people a year.
Basement of the Alamo is number two.
Okay. But it's like also like the hottest place for cars to get stolen from. And if you go over there, there's never sirens going off. There's never any broken glass. What's happening? People are like leaving their keys in their car. The best that I can tell, and like going in and going shopping or leaving their doors unlocked. And you made a good point. Yes, we want to do 100%. We want to do 100%. I'm also a huge fan of NIST, top to bottom, do it all. But if you can't do it all, if you're moving towards that, you're in a better position than probably 90% of the businesses out there, if I had to guess.
Yep. All right. So some risks must be accepted. Not all problems need to be solved if their costs outweigh their benefits. I don't know if I necessarily agree with this. Yes, I agree with some risks must be accepted, but all problems need a backup solution, not solved. Like, even if the backup solution is like pen and paper, like you have to look at, that's part of your risk assessment is like looking at this problem. Like, I don't know anybody that can look at a risk assessment and say, okay, this is an issue, or this is a vulnerability here, a single point of failure, and then just say, oh, we'll just live with that single point of failure, no problem.
I think also maybe he's coming from the position of there is a certain amount of risk in doing business. And I would say, I would agree, you have to look at the cost of the mitigation versus the potential costs of the risks, and then mitigate what makes sense, and then bring yourself to a comfortable place where you have risk. For us, it's NIST cybersecurity controls plus cybersecurity insurance. Now, do we still have risk? Yes. Are those things, do they cost money? Yeah, they do, but it's totally freaking worth it. In my opinion, I'm comfortable with the place where I am, costs of mitigating the risks versus risks that are still out there. And at the end of the day, you can't mitigate the risk 100%. Another thing we always talk about down here, and I mention it from time to time, is we have a huge coast here in Texas, and we get hurricanes, middle of summer through the next month or two. You can count on hurricanes, right? And so it's not a matter of if you're going to get a hurricane, it's just a matter of when. And so you need to be ready for it. Build your house on stilts. Become friends with a contractor. Get insurance. Be ready for when it comes. You can never mitigate the risk. The only way to mitigate the risk would never be to have a house down on the coast. And obviously there's a million people that are accepting that risk. That's how I would put this.
So, yeah, I mean, I would say that, like, with this kind of stuff, when you're doing risk assessment and planning, just challenge yourself a little bit to think outside the box, though, right? Sometimes this stuff doesn't go deep enough or far enough to look for what I would say affordable solutions that might not be perfect or the exact solution, but at least it's a plan to deal with it if it's not available to you, and it won't sink your business, right? That, like, just push yourself a little bit to think outside the box. And like, sometimes we tend to go like, okay, like Salesforce, we're not going to be able to replace Salesforce, right? No, and it would cost you a lot of money to have something kind of in the back, running in the background that you could turn to if something like that went down, right? But what functions are you doing in Salesforce, and how can you take those functions and make them more manual or do them differently in the event of that system not being down, so you can continue to service your customers, right? Because that's the goal of like incident response, is we want to make sure our employees can continue to work and our customers don't notice a disruption in service.
Mm-hmm.
If we can do those two things, you can probably get out of the situation pretty quickly. But if you can't do those two things, you're going to lose customers, you're going to lose employees, you're going to lose revenue. And if you're not prepared, you could go out of business. I didn't hear about this, Randy, but Hippo blocks. Did you all hear about the American Archive of Public Broadcasting Vulnerability Report? So we'll have to look at that one. Maybe that's a topic for another show.
Yeah.
We maybe we'll bring that up in next week. But thanks, Hippo Blocks, for the tip. I guess we'll wrap up here. I like Luke's comment here. Little tongue in cheek, little joke.
I laughed at that one.
IT training company for airlines called Cyber Wings.
I love it. Do it.
A little too soon, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, probably a little too soon. Yeah. So,
thanks for the engagement today, everybody. Randy and I really appreciate it. It's fun to do the show when we have so much engagement and comments coming through as Randy entertains himself as he's trying to put his thoughts together. We covered two big lessons today. Insider threats are a process problem, not just a people problem. Do things like kill orphaned access, monitor for unusual activity, and don't assume the badge turning in means that the danger is gone. And second, third party is first order risk. If your vendor's outage becomes your outage, that's not their problem. It's your business's continuity plan getting graded in public. So that's the show for today. If you found this useful, hit subscribe, tap the like button, drop us a review if you can on a podcasting platform if you're listening to us, and share this with someone who still trusts their vendor maybe a little too much and can learn from this. And hey, if you want to support the show, you can check out buymeacoffee.com/Security Squawk. That'll help us continue to bring you this show ad-free. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time. Stay safe out there.
Bye, everybody.